Okay, Rhonda, I'm going to go ahead and get started as people are still kind of popping in. But good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kathy Shader. I'm a consultant from Marshfield Clinic Health System in the Wisconsin After School Network. I'll be moderating this series of webinars, and we are pleased to be offering this learning series with the Marshfield Clinic Healthcare System and the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Today's webinar is the third of a 5-part series for day camp programs in the state of Wisconsin. This series was developed in consultation with leadership from the American Camp Association Wisconsin, Local Council of Leaders, and the Wisconsin After School Network. We are pleased to have Rhonda Mickelson join us to present this morning's webinar, and I will introduce Rhonda in a moment. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please keep your microphones on mute. If you have questions, we ask you to post those in the chat box, which the Marshfield Clinic staff will be monitoring. We will be fielding questions throughout this presentation, so please use the chat box for any questions that you might have. And as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded and will be sent to all registered participants in the next week. Rhonda Mickelson served as the Director of Accreditation for the American Camp Association for 12 years prior to retiring in 2019. Prior to working for ACA, Rhonda has worked with both day and resident camps and both private and not-for-profit camps. Working at or with camps is her passion, so upon retirement, Rhonda started working at camp once again. I think they call that a second career, Rhonda, right?
Yeah.
And serves as the out-of-camp program director for Chile, Colorado camps. Rhonda lives in Estes Park, Colorado, apparently is seeing snow today, and volunteers in Rocky Mountain National Park, where she spends as much time as possible. Rhonda, I now turn this presentation over to you.
All right, thank you. And as Kathy said, I live here in Estes Park, and we delightfully woke up to, at that point, which was about an inch of snow, which is now about 5 inches of nice, heavy, wet spring snow. So, and that is something that anybody that is familiar with the West these days understands we're in a drought, so any kind of moisture is very welcome. So now I've got to figure out, let's see, there we go. Kathy did a really nice introduction, and I appreciate that, Kathy. I was just going to share a little bit more about myself that kind of will hopefully help you understand why I am where I am today, which is working at camp. So when I was in the 2nd grade, I have 3 older sisters, and all of them had the opportunity to go to camp. And so when I was in the 2nd grade and finally got to go to day camp, I was absolutely ecstatic. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I went to day camp every summer through elementary school. And then as I got into junior high and high school, I actually helped work at day camp as I was very much involved with the Girl Scouts. I was one of those people growing up, and once I was into high school, I knew what I wanted to do, and that was to work at camp. So I graduated from high school, and I left the next day or two to work at camp. I then, sorry, I have a kitty joining me, worked at summer camp after each summer while I was in college, became a backpacking counselor at the camp where I currently work here in Estes Park, did that for about 7 summers. Worked full-time for that camp then for about 10 years prior to joining and working actually with the Girl Scouts. So, in that role, I was the day camp administrator. So worked with Girl Scouts for approximately 10 to 15 years. Then moved into, as Kathy had indicated, worked with the American Camp Association as the Director of Accreditation, where I got the opportunity to work with camps across the country. Retired so I could go back and work at camp, which is what I do now as the out of camp program for Chile, Colorado camps. And I'll be sharing a little bit more about those experiences and what that has meant as we get into this a little bit more. Some of the things that when you leave this session and come back and review it and start thinking about your summer, I would want that you have a new awareness of some key points to consider when you're planning your staff training. And this goes to both the type of content in your staff training and maybe some of the methods and some of the key pieces that you want to think about as you're working with that staff training. Maybe gain some ideas of how to fill those gaps. um, what little tips and tricks might be some things that will work well in your program. And I think that we all know what works well for one program doesn't work at all in another. So you might say, that's not going to work for me, while the person a couple miles down the road might say, wow, that's a great idea. We will have a little ideas that you all have. And as Kathy had commented, if you have questions, please definitely put those questions in the chat box, and we will get those hopefully addressed throughout the time frame. One thing I failed to mention, but I definitely wanted to do is I have fond feelings for Wisconsin, as both of my parents are from Wisconsin, and I spent a fair amount of time up there growing up, and still go back to visit relatives that live in both Western Wisconsin and the Madison area. So, you know, kind of like helping my home state there in some ways. So I'm going to put up a couple questions and just take a real brief time frame here and to find out a little bit more about you. And this is where Kathy's going to do a little bit of help, and so that we can know what, as I said, find out a little bit more about you to help me as I even go through this. So if you can just, in the chat box, mention if you are a first year director, whether it be first year after school program or first year summer camp director. And Kathy, I'll give like just 15 seconds or so for people to answer that, and then you can let me know that response, and we'll go to the next question. So first year directors.
Yeah, I'm not, got it, at least one.
I got one showed up. Actually, I saw that, so that's good. Okay. Another first year, they're a month in. That's great. How many of you have been doing this for 2, 3, 4? Got at least three first years. They're still showing up. And go ahead and just keep typing those in, because they do come up. Got a second year person, fifth year, 2 going on 3. Good. How many of you offer both after school and day camp programs? Right. Looks like several of you offer, a lot of you, your program maybe offers both, but you only work with one of them. Okay. And some of you only have already indicated you only offer day camp, or you only work with the day camp program. So that part's great. How many of you use high school students as staff? Whether it be in your after school program or your day camp. Looks like most, some have high school, but most looks like they have to be at least 18. All right. And then here's one that, how many of you have had a challenging time obtaining staff over the past year? I probably should have said, who has not had a challenging time getting staff over the past year? Would be a smaller group. Somebody said, looking better now. That's good. We're hopeful that camps, somebody's already hired for the summer. I always say this is a time of year for summer staff or for summer camp directors that they hope they gain more than they lose on any given day. I know that's kind of the situations. Final question. How many campers come for at least 1 week at a time? And some of them might come for more than 1 week. Some of them, their parents might actually use your day camp as a child care program. So it looks like maybe them just come for, a lot of them come for all summer, or a significant amount of times, more than 1 week. All right. Well, thank you. That, like I said, that just kind of helps me get a little bit better idea of it. So, and hopefully that will, what I talk about will be appropriate for all of you. So the next several slides, I'm actually going to, I guess, in some ways share a story of how the summer went for Chile, Colorado camps in 2021. And I do want to share a little bit about this camp. It's a 100-year-old. They celebrated their 100th anniversary last summer, which was a delayed celebration because of COVID, like many things. It's in the same family. This camp is located at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park, originally started in Rocky Mountain National Park. They are in the 4th generation of the same family, do a lot of horseback riding, hiking, backpacking. It is a private camp, a very traditional private camp. And as I say that, I also want all of you to realize that what this camp experienced in 2021 is no difference in talking with a variety of other not-for-profit camps, day camps, overnight camps. We really didn't, some of the challenges that we had were felt across the board. So I felt it was still appropriate to kind of share this story. So summer 2021, we had a pretty high number of new staff, 90%, which meant that we didn't have those camp mentors. And if you can think of even yourself and going, if you were to start a job and 90% of those people that were starting that job at the same time you did were new, everybody would kind of be going, now what are we supposed to be doing? And you didn't have any of that informal mentoring. Some of those pieces might be like even sharing where they were to get their art supplies, which when you have that pretty high return rate of staff, your staff training, sometimes you get a little more relaxed and forget to share some of those nitty-gritty details because your returning staff members can help fill those gaps. So pretty high percent of those 90%. We did have a fair number of staff members that had been campers and were coming back. So they at least knew some of those things. But we also found they had a pretty challenging time of transitioning from camper to staff. And so one of the things that even some of the language that we've been using this winter in that hiring is, when you're a camper at a camp, you're kind of that consumer and you take in that program. When you're that staff member, that counselor, you're the provider. You're the one that has to do all of that programming. So finding language to help them transition to realize that, yeah, they had a great time as a camper, and it's completely different when you're a staff member. We found that the staff wanted to be told what to do and how to do it. And if we could get them to, if we went through all of those steps, things went well. And probably the best example I can think of this is, like many camps, we say, okay, we need to have a cleanup day, and we'd like everybody to go out and pick up trash, and each unit was assigned to a specific area. And so we said, now just go out and go ahead and pick up trash. And so what we noticed was that the staff would have campers and they would go like along a specific trail or along the roadway and pick up trash. And if that trash was very much in that roadway, it would get picked up. But if it were 5, 10 to 15 feet off that roadway, still very easily accessible, they wouldn't see it to go do it. So we learned to change languaging to say, okay, it's trash cleanup day. And as you do this, these are some things we want you to consider. Pick up what you see, but then also make sure you look to the sides of the road or the path, and any trash that you can see and can easily get to, have your campers pick that up. So we were having to very much continually break down instructions into many smaller pieces and say, this is what you do and this is how you do it. Along with that, staff training was continual, which in some ways it always is. This year, in the summer of 22, it was even more continual. It seemed that our staff was fragile. They did really well the first, couple of weeks, and then they got pretty tired. And I think as we look back, we're like, well, and it's one of our discussion questions for later is why, what contributed to that part of it? And before I go on, I want to just make sure that I say we did have a really good staff. We had a great summer in 2021. It was a safe summer. We have a high staff returning rate for 2022. And so I think part of what we learned and some of the adjustments we made within the summer, some of which I'll be sharing, are what we did to help make sure that things did stay on track, that we did end up being able to say, yes, 2021, it was a tough summer. I think you can ask any camp director and they will tell you that 2021 was probably the hardest summer they've had for a variety of reasons. And we learned and will continue on for 2022. The other part, and part of this I think was contribute to both the staff training being continually and fragile, is in addition to that, your normal camp stuff, there were some other environmental and challenges that were outside the control of either the camp or our counselors. Being in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is the 4th visited national park, provides challenges of its own. In November of 2021 or 2020, there had been significant forest fires, which impacted some of the space and lands that we were able to use. And some of those things were continually changing. So like our camp, like Chile camps, and I'm sure many of you camps, both in your after school program and in your day camp program, you've got your typical staff training. And it's going to include things such as the why of your camp. What's your mission? What are your goals? What are your desired outcomes? Some of you with more, with the whys and the Boys and Girls Clubs might be actually tracking your outcomes and doing some outcome studies because that provides you a better access to grant money. So helping your staff understand what it means when you say one of the desired outcomes of our camp is that campers have an affinity for nature. What does that mean? What does that look like? So obviously that's part of your staff training. Program specific. Even day camps that run a very general program that do arts and crafts and potentially archery, have field trips. You've got to have specific training for those areas. Age group and or unit specific. We all know that working with 5 and 6 year olds is very different than working with that 11 and 12-year-old. What are some of those things that are going to be specific? What are some of the counseling skills we want our staff members to have? Little things such as when you talk with that camper, get down at their eye level, so you're not you're not looking above them or looking up to them, but try to get eye level with those campers. Not correcting a camper in front of another camper and other campers unless it's an immediate need to stop some program or stop doing something. So all those different counseling skills, how to get kids to line up, how to have campers be quiet. Then some general camp information. What are your check-in procedures? What are your checkout procedures? Who talks to parents about specific things? All of those policies and procedures. Your risk management pieces. What are the key things that you have to be aware of? if you're held in a public park, it could be that part of that risk management is talking more specifically about interacting with the public in that public park and how that needs. Talks about your health care. Who does health care at your camp? When the camper falls and skins the knee, who takes care of that? If a camper gets sick, who cares with that? And obviously, staff training can be both virtual and in person. I know at camp where I currently work, we have some of our required things such as that the state requires, such as standard precautions and some child abuse things, all of which are virtual courses that or online courses that the staff members take. So, and I think one of the key things I failed to mention in my previous slide, and this goes, I believe, for Wisconsin, Colorado licenses all of their both resident camps and day camps. And I know Wisconsin has some licensing. I can't remember if it's for both day camps and resident camps. But so in addition to all the regular camp stuff that was going on in 2021, we had our healthcare, our licensing care. The state in 2021 had required a variety of COVID plans that we had to have in place. And then the camp is also ACA accredited. So we had state regulations, county regulations, COVID plans, all of those layered on top of a summer where the summer of 2020 was, this camp, as I mentioned, normally has 450 to 500 campers. In 2020, they semi-operated, meaning they had 40 to 50 campers at a time. Groups of 10, totally separate groups, separate programming. So a completely different summer. So 2021 was a reset, and we all kept saying it's amazing how much we, quote, forgot in that year that we didn't have camp. You'd think after 98, 99 years, you'd know what was going on, and even camps operating that long kind of forgot where stuff was. So some of the highlights from that staff training, we have approximately 10 days of staff training, which includes experiential trips for our hikers, our backpackers, mountain bikers, horseback riders. We're able to bring in outside speakers on specific topics, which is nice. Some of them were Zoom, some of them were able to come in. We did some one-on-one meetings, individual coaching with various people at different times during our staff training. A lot of group sessions where it'd be the majority of staff together and then much smaller groups. And then we provided planning time and review time. And I realized that, you know, this is probably one of the differences. Camp is in a little bit different situation where they've got some of those resources. We are very easily able to have rangers from Rocky Mountain National Park come to our staff and speak with our staff because Rocky Mountain National Park is in our backyard. That's not the situation all the time, but as you start looking at your staff training and who can you involve, I think we all know that sometimes having that outside person come in, even if they say the very same thing that you would be saying, your staff hear it differently. So think about if you have your programs in a park, maybe somebody from that park district can come and just talk about a little bit more about the park and some of what they need to be doing within that park. Are there alumni that you can have come in and help with your staff training? So maybe sometimes some of the vendors, if they provide some, you know, either programming or equipment, sometimes they will be more than happy to come in and give or come do a 15, 30 minute, even an hour long session. So as you look at your staff training, be creative with who you get to come. That it doesn't always have to be just you and or your staff in front of that group. So even with all of that training, our 10 days of training and all of those things, we still had things happen. We had staff go forgetting camper medications when they were going on a backpack trip. And all of us know that that's probably one of the worst things that you can do is forget to give a kid their medication. We had staff leave property and get an hour away from camp and realize that, oh my goodness, they had forgotten a box of their food for their 4-day backpack trip. And we had to help go, they came back and got that food. We had staff members that weren't following those protocols, more specifically in Rocky Mountain National Park and camping where they were absolutely supposed to be parking. And the rangers coming in, having a nice conversation with that. I think this one was, we had some that they didn't realize or recognize some of their mistakes, such as on a hike, completely misjudging weather, which then led to a very relatively quick descent from above tree line. As I mentioned, we had issues with Park Service regulations. Towards the end of the summer, we got some staff that just did not want to be on program. They were very specifically hired for an area and would tell their director or their supervisor, I don't want to do that tomorrow, which was kind of a new one for us. And while you tried to respect that person because you didn't know what all was going on, it did create some challenges in staffing. And then this one is a good bad. We would on more than one occasions, we had staff that were out on program, and this could easily happen whether your people leave your property or they're right there on property. They say, what am I supposed to do in this situation? And as I said, this is the good bad. You want them to ask for help when they need it. And you also want them to be able to use their training and figure out what to do next. So in these situations, we would try to, as quickly and appropriately as possible, ask a few questions of them so that you could help them learn that, oh, I really do know what I need to do, but also guide them in that appropriate manner. And I said this, the texting and asking us what to do is probably a newer scenario, mainly because we didn't used to have cell service in all the places that we have it. We were lucky in that, I guess, I don't know, not sure if it's lucky or not, that staff didn't have access, the cell phones didn't work in as many places as they do. So this one, we are actually, as we look to our training for this coming summer, we'll be revising and addressing this issue a little bit more. So we can figure out what to do. As I go through this list, all of the things that occurred on this were from first-year staff members. And so as what we got to realize that our first-year staff members were often working with another first-year staff member. And therefore, once again, I go back, they didn't have that mentorship. That the returning staff member might go, oh my gosh, we got to make sure we check to have all of our food. Did you get the medications for the trip? So that's where having 2 brand new staff members that were so in our program, and just as with any program, there's so many things for them to remember that I think they just in some ways got overwhelmed, and that's what we started realizing. So we added some, and we worked and added some training, and we adjusted some things. We had additional program specific training within 15 to 30 minute little sessions at appropriate times throughout the summer. We'd anticipating that we would have some challenges because of not having the one summer and then having so many new staff. We added a new position to help supervise and coach those out of camp, those hiking and backpacking counselors that actually was going on the trips and would then come back and have conversations and say, wow, you did this really well. This you might consider. So it's that hands-on observation and then coaching based on that observation. As I said, we did mid-season trainings for those program staff, more and more one-on-one check-ins. Some of these were planned, and then as you look at the bottom one, some of these were intentional and informal check-ins. Finding the times that you can be around your counselors when they're with campers and you can have that observation and then can have that 5-minute check-in while the campers are doing something else and the other staff member might be doing something with the campers. We found those were actually invaluable. In our program, when everybody comes off a hike or a backpack trip, they bring their, we do bulk lunches. So they'll get, a thing of flour tortillas and some cheese and fruit and cookies and peanut butter and whatever, and they make their lunches while they're on the activity. And at the end, they bring all that stuff back to a designated spot to clean up, throw away leftover food. And so while some of the campers were working on that and other staff were observing campers, provided myself and the other supervisor a time to just say, hey, how did the trip go? What was going on? Oh, here are some things that you might think about. So those informal check-ins. And then we also we had weekly scheduled communication, both printed, some were text, some were printed, some were in person. So I think the key part is we continually found ways to communicate and touch base with counselors so that they felt supported and that they felt that we heard them throughout the summer. In talking with other resident camp directors and other day camp directors, they felt that some of the issues, as I said, some of the issues that we had were also issues that they experienced as well. The staff members not wanting to go on program, needing to be told what to do. So I guess the good part was we weren't alone in some of our things. So that leads me into what we learned from last year and what we're planning on and looking to do for 2022. And a lot of this we kind of started at the tail end of 2021. And hopefully some of this stuff is things that you will also have that opportunity to do. We want to set the stage and build our culture, build the basics. So I realize it's May 4th, and day camps start anywhere from early June to mid-June. And many of you are going from after-school programs immediately into day camp programs. And some with the same staff, some with different staff, some with 1 day of training, 2 days of training. So part of this is how do you have these things happen, and where do you find the time to do it? And I think one of the key things that we found out and recognized was that 15 to 30-minute check-ins are amazing. Having a 15-minute session prior to the start of the day, if you can do that. Getting half of the staff together for 30 minutes to have some reminders. I think one of the key learning things and that we all know is you don't need to know something until you need it. So what we found out was at the beginning of the summer, we would give them all this information and just kind of almost in a fire hose manner. But some of that information they didn't need until week 3 or 4 or 5 of camp. So while you might give them an overview of some of those things, come back closer to that time frame when they're actually going to need it to review it. So, and part of this goes along with what culture do you want to build? I think one of the cultures that we at Chile want to build for our staff is that asking questions is great. We'll all probably fail at some time, and that's okay as long as nobody gets hurt. So asking those questions is going to help with that. It's part of that culture that we also want to build, those that respect and kindness. And to me, that goes along with that. Asking questions is great. Do you want to build fun into your program? Are you like, we're just going to get it done, doesn't matter? So think about the culture and how you want all of that for both your staff, because the culture for staff could be slightly different than your culture for campers. You might have part of this culture for staff that then feeds into the culture that you want for your campers. Some of that research that ACA has been doing on the impact of camp is really pointing to the culture of a camp is critical. Along with that, everything you do contributes to that culture. Within your staff training, within your messaging, all of those things contribute to that. So we all have, I would anticipate 2022 will look a little bit different than 2021. And we anticipate, as I mentioned, we're going to have a higher level of returning staff than we did in the prior years. Yet, we also, you've probably seen it when you've got returning staff and you've got first-year staff, and there's kind of always that initial click of the two different groups. One of the things that we're going to do the very first day, when staff first arrive and we first start our staff training, is actually break those two groups apart. And we're going to ask our returning staff, what culture do we want to share? What do we want? What do we want our camp to look like this summer? Then we're going to have our first year staff come and say, these are my fears. These are my expectations. Then we'll have those two groups come back together and share, so that the new staff hear what the returning staff love about camp, how they feel about it, what they want to share, what culture they want. And that returning staff can hear, I'm afraid that I'm not going to know where the trailhead is. I'm afraid that I've never shared a room with someone else. I have this fear that I'm not going to know what to do when that 6-year-old camper comes up to me and is homesick. So let those two groups hear how the other feel, and then hopefully that will start helping. One, the returning staff can help the others in with their fears, or they'll be reminded of like, oh yeah, I had that same fear my first year, and the first year staff will know, oh, these are some of the things they want. They want us to ask questions. They want us to be able to learn from them. So hopefully that will at least help with some of that, and once again start rebuilding that informal mentoring. The other thing that we are going to definitely focus on for this summer is something that, in all honesty, I don't think we've, at least at our camp, have done that good a job at, and having learning targets. We actually believe that the first thing the staff must learn is what they're supposed to be learning. So we've all gone to sessions and they start off and you're like, okay, I read the description of this session, but what am I supposed to be learning? I could go back, and at the beginning I talked about, we want you to learn some new ideas and how to fill some gaps. So at the beginning of every session, we're going to start telling them what they should be learning. We're going to have learning targets. We want to do this so they don't have to guess. What is this session about? And then this hopefully will lead to more empowered and intentional learners. We found this out kind of, I'm not going to say, we did several sessions last summer on mental health, mental and emotional health, MESH. And we had some great outside speakers come in, and they shared some really good information. And unfortunately, the information that got shared, the staff members didn't catch what they were supposed to do with that good information. We didn't tell them what they were supposed to be learning. So we're going to, at the beginning of all of our sessions, have learning targets. And so that learning target will describe exactly what we expect staff to learn and how we will ask them to demonstrate that learning when it's applicable, such as a skills list. That learning target will share, the ideas and the topics that are important in that part. So, and we will consistently share these learning targets throughout the session. So come back and say, okay, now, so in my session, one of the sessions we give is on how to use a map and compass. It's a pretty basic skill that in today's world is not used that much because everybody just uses Google Maps or Siri to tell them how to get to. They use their GPS, and so they don't have to think about using a map and compass. Well, in our situation, when you're in the mountains, using a GPS can be nice, but that doesn't give you the big pictures of when you're going on a longer trip. So we do a map and compass. And continually throughout that session, we talk about why using the map, why we're sharing how to use the map, the key points of the map, why we're using the compass, the key points of the compass, how you put them together, and continually saying, these are the things you're supposed to be learning about this. So we will consistently share those. When the presenters consistently share these, staff members are more, it helps them become more capable decision makers because they're finally going, okay, in this session, we're talking about map and compass, or we're talking about mental health. And at the end of this, I'm going to come out with 3 ways that I should talk to that 6-year-old camper. I should get down at the level and look them in the eye. I should let them know that however they feel is okay for them to feel. Instead of when they say they miss home, say, oh, that's okay, you're going to be there this afternoon. Say, it's okay that you miss home. Because if you miss home, that means you've got some good things there. And then we're going to say, and then the third part of that is to say, okay, it's great that it's understandable that you miss home. And now we're at camp. So how about we go do something else? And then let's go do this arts and crafts project. And then you can share about that project when you go home. So now they're learning 3 ways in that session that they can talk to that 6-year-old camper when that camper has that challenge, when they're feeling a little bit homesick. So it's not just the general concept, it's what are they actually going to learn? On some things, you can also, at some point, you might need to have a checklist. If they're learning how to do a belay, if they're going to be your archery counselor. Archery counselors need to know where the equipment is. They need to know how to check that the equipment is safely done. So if you're leading a session on archery, some of those learning targets would be know equipment is stored, how to string the bow, how to put on the arm guard, how to give the range commands. And so you might even, part of those learning targets could actually be that skills checklist. So depending upon the topic, the learning targets could vary. Whenever possible, have those learning targets written and placed right in front of the group so that they will continually be able to see those learning targets. and know what it is they're supposed to be getting. Any questions on any of that, or anybody that has some ideas to share? All right. A couple other things that we definitely learned from our last summer, and also that I've done in talking with a variety of people for this. Intentionality is key. It's important to have a reason for everything you do. When you're looking at your time frame for staff training, and you're like, oh my God, I've got to cover all of these things that the state requires, and all of these things that my organization requires, and I want to be able to cover all of these fun things because these are what are going to help my staff members do a better job. As you're going through that list of staff training topics that I think we all create, look at that list and ask yourself, why are we covering this? How's it going to contribute to our program? And if it doesn't contribute it, and it's not something that you are absolutely required to do, ask yourself, is this something we really need to be doing? And one example that I'll share is here in Colorado, for both day camp and resident camp, in order for staff members or anybody beyond a registered nurse or physician to administer medication, staff members have to go through a medication administration course. Parts online, and then they have about an hour in-person part. Now, this is not something that if we were not required to do, we probably would not spend that hour plus of staff training to do it, but we're required to do it. That's while we're doing it. On the other hand, we will have a session, as I described earlier, about our breaking up our returning staff and our new staff with a very intentional purpose to why we are doing that. Not required, but we feel having that session is going to help contribute to the culture at camp that we want. So go through that list. Why are we doing it? What's it going to contribute? With your staff training, set expectations regarding attendance and engagement. With your day camp program and your after school program, if you've got new staff coming in, there might be a session specific to things with your organization that if some of your after school staff are transitioning into your day camp staff, they might not need that specific session that a brand new staff member might do. So if you can say, yeah, if you worked on our after school staff, this is a session that you don't have to attend. So even looking at the sessions that you offer and how you break things down, does everybody have to be at every session? Once again, that's making a statement that you respect them and you respect their time. What engagement level do you expect at your sessions? Some of them could be that more like this one, someone is the talking head at the front of the room. Some of those sessions might be where they are actually doing the activity. If you're teaching archery or you're teaching a craft project, you let them know we're going to be doing a craft project because that's part of what we do at camp and we're trying to model that. And we expect every staff member to be there and to be engaged in making that project. Let them know what those expectations are. If you're able to send a training schedule and agenda ahead of time, let people know what's coming. That'll help them mentally prepare. This is what we're doing. This is what's going on. I think this is really true if things are completed online. Some of that might be a virtual training such as this one, and some of it might be the completion of an online course. Send that, if it's not, if some of it's online courses, send that list ahead of time and include how long that session is going to take. You might open, the staff member might open up and say, oh, I got 45 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get this, try to get some of this training out of the way. And they choose one that takes 2 hours. If they'd known that they could have taken that 30-minute one, now they're in this 2-hour one, and what do you know, are they going to stop halfway through and then they forgot what they've done? So letting staff know of that schedule and agenda ahead of time. If it's online courses, how long are those online courses take? Demand accountability, especially with online courses. How are you going to know that they actually took that online course? How? I have no clue what you guys are doing as I'm sitting here talking. Chances are, because I do this, you might be looking at an email. You might be looking at your phone. You might have run out to get a glass of water. All of those things happen. That's life. I don't take it personally. That's okay. But if for your staff training, when it really comes back and you're doing the online session, in our situation on medication administration, we have to have that accountability. So is there a checklist? Is there a in-person, let's have a little check-in? You know, now it seems more often than not with your CPR training, you take about a course online, which takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending upon the course and your you know, how much you have done with that. So I take my CPR course and I got stuff figured out, and then I actually have to go do an in-person and I have to show them that I knew. So in that, they demand accountability. So how are you going to have accountability for your staff for training, however it is offered? Coaching throughout the summer. Get one of those small, you know, little 3x5 little spiral notebook tablets, and have that in a pencil or pen. And as you walk around camp, because directors and supervisors really should be walking around camp and observing what's going on, watch those staff members. And when you see one doing something really good, write it down, because you won't remember it. And then the next time you see that staff member, you can let them know that you saw them talking to that 6-year-old, and you saw that they got down to the eye level of that 6-year-old, and then that they appropriately got that 6-year-old back into program. Positive coaching, letting them know when you saw something good, letting that staff member that has had a tough day and in that split second yelled at his camper in front of other campers, which might not have quite have been appropriate. Write it down when you have the appropriate time. Sometimes some situations call for it to be sooner than later. Talk with that staff member, let them know, and then give them ideas of how it might have looked different. In the summer camp world, an hour is like a week. So you can't wait and say, oh, maybe they're just having a bad day and it'll get better tomorrow. Don't count on that. Try to help that coaching along. And if you've seen that they've done a really good job prior, and this might just be that one time where you caught them doing something that wasn't the greatest, reference it. I did see you, you know, I was a little surprised, because you've always spoke to your campers in a very appropriate manner, and this time you just kind of flew off the handle. Is there something going on? So recognize that maybe they were doing good, but coaching, observation, write things down because we won't remember it, and then let them know about it. So that's that ongoing piece. Role play scenarios. when in today's world, when we talk about one of the things that I think we had some of the biggest challenges with our staff members is we went over all the training, and if things went just as they should, staff members did great. But when the weather got a little bit bad, or a camper didn't behave quite the way the staff members should, that's when our staff members had challenges. They didn't know what to do in some of those scenarios. So if you've been at camp previously, even if you're a new director, definitely returning directors, pull up some of those scenarios that you've had in the past where you're like, oh, I can't believe that this happened. Turn it into a role play scenario so staff members can see maybe what to do as well as what not to do. Some of that can be related to behavior issues. That can be related to weather issues. It can be, what are you going to do in the fire drill? What are you going to do when the archery bows break and you can't get into the archery range? They've had play day or an hour scheduled to be outside, and all of a sudden it's pouring down rain. What are they going to do? What we have found out is that staff members are challenged with being creative, knowing how to connect the dots, and in some ways filling time because nobody is making the schedule for them. Current staff members seem to have, everybody told them what to do, and they made schedules for them all along. So if you do role play scenarios, these can be during your staff training. When stuff comes up, they can be in a 15-minute little blip before the start of the day or various times. So I think we sometimes forget about the value of this. Also, I think what we have found out is using both technology and old school stuff. Paper and pencil, write it down, do the new technology. I go back to the GPS as well as the map and compass. Moving on, a couple things. I love this saying. It says, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. It goes right back to having your staff members during your staff training, wherever possible, experiential. Have them make the craft project. Have them be in archery. Have them be in that role play. Involve those staff members. Returning staff members, actively involve them. Ask them to help lead a session. If we have to teach something, it helps us learn it even better. So any way that you can involve staff to help them learn, even in the scenario where you as the director, and this is something you would want to stage and make sure the staff member this happened to knew it was staged. A staff member is doing something wrong, quote, in a staged manner, and you come up to them and you just yell at them for like, oh my God, I can't believe that you are not washing those dishes in the same place, in the appropriate place you're supposed to be doing, in front of other staff members. Ask, and then you turn around and you say, okay, now everybody knows, just so you know, I told John that we were going to be doing this. So John knew I was going to be yelling at him. He's not really doing anything wrong. But John, how did it feel when I yelled at you? So even in those scenarios, because now John is being involved in sharing what he experienced with his others. So actively involve returning staff, actively involve new staff. When something doesn't work, make adjustments throughout the summer. Too often we get into, well, we've always done it this way. It's worked in the past. We can just keep going. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Don't assume they'll figure it out. As I said, an hour in summer camp is almost a week. Actually, probably more as a day as a week, but things move fast. You can't wait to make adjustments a week. Make them as soon as you need them when things aren't working. The other thing that we definitely started doing, and I know we will continue, is use when, not if, stuff happens. So you can let your staff members, during that training, you can say, instead of saying, if a camper gets, quote, lost, these are some of the things you want to do. Say, when that camper gets lost, and typically they're really not lost, they're just in another group. When it starts pouring down rain in the middle of a session, not if it starts pouring down rain, use the word when, not if, because 95% of the time those things will happen. Hopefully not the last lost camper, but as I said, normally they're with another group. So all of those things will contribute to helping both new staff and that returning staff get more ideas, learn some of those key pieces of training, and then be able, I think part of our goal for the summer is to help staff, give tools to staff, to give the tools to our counselors and staff members so that they can make decisions on their own, ask appropriate questions, and then that even within their programming and where it's appropriate, they make their adjustments throughout the summer. Example, on our hikes, they leave in the morning, they come back in the afternoon. Those counselors are expected to be with that program, that group of kids the entire day for programming purposes. Well, if just like in Wisconsin, sometimes it starts raining in the middle of the day, and typically here when it starts raining, it also starts getting pretty cold. And now you're putting campers into a situation, if they're not staying active, there's that potential for hypothermia. We have more hypothermia in the summer than in the winter. I need to be able to make sure that our counselors have the tools that they can make those judgment calls and make the adjustment throughout the day to say, you know, we're going back to camp where we can get dry and warm, and we will continue doing program activities related to hiking throughout the summer. I don't want them calling me every time to say, it's raining, should we come back to camp? You don't want your counselors, new counselors or old counselors, having to text you, call you, come up to you and say, it's raining, what should we be doing now? Give them the tools to follow the training that you have given them. And I think that's kind of where some of our bigger challenges have been. If anybody has any thoughts on situations that they had last summer that they creatively found a way to solve, or even not so creative, they found a way to solve, whether it be creative or kind of the, gosh, that was too easy, I should have thought of that earlier. Yes, nothing's showing up in the chat box, so. Right now is the time if, let's see. Kathy, can you tell me how many people are still in the room?
1 second. I've got 20 total listed, but the staff will probably stay off breakout rooms. So probably
Okay.
17. I go with 17.
Okay. That sounds good. So what I'd like to do now is just break into not in the moment, not right now, but just in a moment, break into 4 different groups. And so I anticipate when that happens that this slide will disappear. So if you folks have your cell phone with you, if you want to take a picture of this slide, because I'm going to ask you to have a brief discussion with it sounds like there'll be 3 to 4 to 5 people in each group. Just some questions to consider. First one being, are some of the challenges that we experienced in 2021 and potentially moving into 2022 inherent to this generation of staff? Many have had decisions and schedules made for them throughout their life. So thoughts on that. Second one, what role has the impact of COVID had with staffing challenges? And I should have added, and do we think they will continue into 2022? Remember, in 2021, for those of you that operated, most college students hadn't been totally on a college campus that much. If they had been, there were some pretty restrictive things. They hadn't been with groups, hadn't gone to concerts. We're a year past that now to some extent. Do we still think we'll have some of those impacts? Do you feel you need to provide mental health training for staff to help your camp or your staff members work with your campers? And then how can we help our staff connect the dots? How do we help them take that training and then learn to get to those, make those appropriate judgment calls? So if you can get, and just, if you take these questions and we'll just let each group determine which one they would like to discuss. And you'll be in those sessions for just about 3 or 4 minutes. We'll say 4 minutes once they're broken up, Ryan. So if you want to go ahead and get them broken into 4 groups, and actually give them 4 minutes from once they've been broken into those groups. And then what will happen, you guys will come back into the main room for just a couple of things.
I think you get everybody back, Rhonda.
Okay. And I don't know, can any of them be unmuted where they might be able to share, if anyone is willing to share what they discussed?
They can come off mic.
Yes, if anybody's willing to share, if they can come off mic and just kind of give a quick overview of what you talked about in your group. Related to this topic, these questions are not, in all honesty.
In our group, we kind of talked about, like, what the challenges. We talked about like just the difference in communication styles, like how some staff prefer to text versus like phone calls, lack of professionalism when it comes to communication, like not reading information when it's sent out, not responding to you when you send out information, and just that like friend versus boss, having to teach them that like they're your boss versus your friend and that kind of thing. So we talked about that. Maybe even like doing some hand holding for staff in the beginning. It seems a lot more of that than in past.
Definitely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any from another group want to share what they talked about or discussed?
We talked a little bit about newer staff and how it's harder to find people. Before you used to have a lot of applicants and now you kind of get what you get. For staff, it seems like a lot more people are working from home or doing other online jobs. Or now they're just kind of doing it for experience and not to have a job necessarily, that maybe they're going into teaching or something with children. So
I think finding staff, as we all know, it's a challenge across the whole country, and unfortunately, summer camps, day resident, whatever, are not immune from that. And trying to identify those reasons, I think, is part of the challenge. I appreciate whoever commented about just prior talking about having to do more hand holding. And I think that once again is something that all camps have been experiencing. You know, we're into, whether it be good, bad, different, it doesn't really matter. We're into quote a different generation of staff than what many of us that have been in the camping community for a while have experienced. And so we're having to change our mindsets. And I continually remind myself, Rhonda, don't say that, wow, back in my day, because it's not that, it's a different world. It is a completely different world. And having how the communication methods, how they're different, and trying to keep up with, are they texting? Is it on Instagram? Is it on Facebook? And which way do we communicate with people? I had to laugh because I recently went to visit my mom in Idaho. My mom is 94, and she keeps trying to find a smartphone that she is comfortable using. And when I was there a couple weeks ago, I think we finally found one. And she wanted to be able to text and do a couple different, relatively what we think of as simple things. And so I worked with her and taught her how to text, and she could actually do voice to text and those things. So she sent one of my sisters a text, and then she emailed my sister to tell her that she had sent her the text. Now, most of us would send the text to say we sent the email, but you know, at least she's learning. But I use that example is because we're all in different places and trying to figure out that communication. And I think that's going to be one of our continual challenge. But looking at on how do we work with staff members that grew up, having decisions made for them, having schedules made for them all along, being told what to do. And now we're asking them to be in that role where they have to make the decisions and figure it out. So I think that's part of where the staff training methods that we need to think about have also somewhat changed. So kind of just along with that in communication, create your culture, and that's both your culture for your staff as well as your culture for your campers. The comment out being a friend versus a quote a boss is, where do you find that line? And I think that's a challenge in all camp. Having that open, you know, just because you have the open door doesn't mean you're their best friend. Think about how you share information ahead of time. Some of this relates to your cultures on Facebook, email, Zoom, Instagram, Twitter, whatever method you might use. Let your staff know about this. Why are you doing that training on that specific topic? What's the purpose of it? Absolutely be intentional in everything you do. Tell your story. We all like to hear fun stories. So sometimes your training can be done in a story method. Part of that story method can be role playing. Make sure that they know what they're supposed to be learning. Don't assume that they go to that session on, I'll use my medication administration. To me, the title pretty much says what it's about. Don't assume that your staff members realize that this session is on how you give medicine. Well, it kind of is, but it also gives all these other things, and it's required by the state. Tell those pieces of it. I think too often, I at some point read and have heard from more than one person that when our staff members continually ask us questions, some of us take that they're challenging what we're saying and they don't think it's appropriate or right. And in reality, they just want the information. Be transparent. Provide all that information. Don't assume that they're going to figure it out. Don't take offense when they ask a lot of questions. Say, wow, they want to know, so I'm going to tell them. Tell the story and be flexible in how you go about things. You might have scheduled 2 hours for something and you realize that you're going to need more and figure out where you can take it. But most of all, have fun as you're doing it, because if you have fun doing it and are enjoying it, that's going to come back to that staff. So then, kind of as a homework, based on some of what we discussed today, kind of, I think, and not I say you don't have to write this down, but maybe for later in the day, jot down 3 ways that you're going to look at your staff training and revise it from some of the things that we discussed today. That's kind of all I have. I did share with Kathy while you guys were in your breakout group, we actually did have a snowplow go down my road. We've gotten about 6 inches of snow, so we're very grateful. And thank you, and I hope everybody has a wonderful 2022.
Super. Thank you, Rhonda. We're actually grateful that you have the snow and we do not. I think we're all jumping for joy. It's going to hit like 60 something today. So yeah, thanks again, Rhonda. I think this was really great. If you all have further questions regarding today's webinar, please email the Wisconsin After School Network at the email address provided in the chat box. More information about a series of professional development opportunities in addition to this learning series can be found on the Wisconsin After School Network website, and the web address will also be posted in the chat box. Our next day camp webinar will be next Wednesday, May 11th from 10 to 11:30. Our speaker is Jay Benedith with Jay Benedith Coaching Services, and Jay's presentation will focus on difficult conversations in camp and is titled Challenging Conversations 101. We're hoping to get a description out as a reminder to people as well. We encourage you to participate in this discussion as we all work to continue to provide quality out of school time opportunities for kids and families. Rhonda, are you available to stay online if anyone has questions, or do you need to kind of move on?
No, I can stay around if anybody has questions.
Super. And so if you have questions for Rhonda, please hang on. Thank you for your participation on today's webinar and the work you do on behalf of the children and families in the state of Wisconsin. You guys have a great day. Enjoy that sunshine. It's really been a while, Rhonda. I think it's like 2 weeks since we've seen the sun. That's what it feels like. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, we've not had bright sunshine in a while. It's kind of been a cloudy,
like hazy, yeah.
And or if it was sunny, it was 40-mile-per-hour winds.
Okay, if anyone has questions, I think everyone's pretty much departed. There's still a couple people on. If anyone has questions for Rhonda, now's the time. We're going to have to come off mic to ask her. Down to 6, I'm going to assume no. I think we're good. Rhonda, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day and take a hike for me in Rocky Mountain, will you?
Okay, I will. Thanks a lot.
Say hi to Deb.
Uh-huh.
All right, take good care. Sarah and Ryan, thank you so much.